Hello, and welcome to 5 Minute Math. Today, for our number talk, we are looking at these two mixed numbers and trying to evaluate if the difference is going to be a little bit less than 2 or a little bit greater than 2. So, first things first, what do we know about the whole numbers? Well, 8 minus 6. 8 minus 6 is going to get you 2. So, our answer is going to be around 2, and that's going to kind of be represented by that line right there. Really, we're looking at the fractions to see is it going to be a little bit less than 2 or a little bit greater than 2. If this happens to be a smaller fraction, the 5/11ths, and this happens to be a larger fraction, that 8/15ths, when you take a larger from a smaller, you end up having to regroup. And if we regroup that 8 into a 7 to make the fraction subtraction really work, then that means we're going to be a little bit less than 2 because we have to regroup the whole number. But if this happens to be larger and this happens to be smaller, well, when you take a smaller from a larger, you got a little bit left over. So it's going to be a little bit greater than 2. So really, we just need to evaluate these fractions. Hopefully, we're noticing that 5/11ths and 8/15ths, they're both kind of close to 1/2. So let's see what happens if I'm trying to evaluate these by 1/2. So I want to take my 11ths and I want to figure out, okay, what's half of 11? What would be 1/2 if I were to make that 11ths? Well, it's difficult because the denominator is odd. So what I could do is I can just look at the denominators on either side of it. So if I wanted to take half of 10, that's going to be 5. If I wanted to take half of 12, right, that's going to be 6. So halfway between 5 and 6, there we go, 5.5 or 5.5. So where would my 5/11ths sit? Well, my 5/11ths is going to be a little bit less than 5.5. So I'm going to put my 5/11ths right here. But remember, this 5.5, that's the same thing as 1/2, which means my 5/11ths is a little bit less than 1/2, right? It's 0.5 less than 1/2. Let's do the same thing with the 8/15ths. All right, what's halfway in between, half of 15? Let's look at the 14ths. Let's look at the 16ths. That'll give us an idea. Half of 14 is going to be 7. Half of 16 is going to be 8. So 15 is in between 14 and 16. So in between 7 and 8, it's going to be 7.5. And where does that 8/15ths lie? Well, 8/15ths is actually going to be a little bit larger than 7.5 over 15. Remember, this is 1/2. So 8/15ths is actually a little bit larger than 1/2. We can actually use that now. I have a little bit larger than 1/2, which means this is the larger number. And 5/11ths is a little bit smaller or less than 1/2, which means this is the smaller number. And when you take a larger number from a smaller number, you're going to end up having to regroup this to make it really work, which means it's going to be a little bit less than 2.